Hey everybody, and welcome to A New Normal, our study through the exile. Man, I'm excited about today. We're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about a particular issue from Daniel chapter 2 to Daniel chapter 6, and even further in Scripture, is the idea of context. Now, context is an extremely important thing for us to understand as believers, because as we read through Scripture, context is going to play a major role in large chunks of Scripture. See, if I was to read Scripture without context, and I came to places like Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I might be encouraged and believe that I could fly, I could become a great basketball player, I believe that I could do any number of things. But the reality behind that verse is that's not what Paul is trying to convey whatsoever. And I have to understand that because the context is that Paul is not writing that to me, a Westerner, 2,000 years later. He's actually writing that to the Philippian church in a time where it's difficult for them to be followers of Christ, and even more difficult for Paul because he is in prison when he's actually writing that letter. And the context of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me is meant to help us understand that we have the capacity to trust and follow Jesus, and through him, we can spread the gospel and become and make disciples for the kingdom with the intention of bringing people to a relationship with the Father and Jesus. It's not necessarily about how academic or how athletic I can be. All of those are good things, and the Lord can totally do that stuff. That's not the point. And it's important for us to remember that as we read through many different areas of Scripture, but especially in these next few chapters of Daniel. As we read through the areas of Daniel, the context is going to be a major clue because it's going to tell us a lot of what's going on in world history. But it's not going to give us direct connections to how God is orchestrating the world history. That's actually in different places in Scripture. And though we have access to it and there's plenty of opportunities for us to look back, I'm sure that it's going to be difficult for some of us to actually sit down and meditate and think through and even sift through the different areas of Scripture. And so, as we meditate on these different things, I want to give you one other example of why it's important to have context accurate in what we do with Scripture. For us to understand context in Scripture means that you and I are going to have to read Scripture with a certain lens. And our context is generally whatever we bring to the table. As an American citizen, as a Westerner, as a guy, as a white male, I bring all these different context clues to what I believe is actually happening in a story. But if I want Scripture to transform me like it's meant to do, then I have to place myself in the shoes of the individual who's writing, the individual who's receiving, or what's going on in that actual place in history. If you were to read Scripture the way that you read a book for school, you probably would be pretty shocked, because Scripture is meant to be transformational, not informational. When you read books like Frankenstein, or you read Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, The Hatchet, any of those different books that you may have read in your life, and I understand there's probably many more that you guys have had to read, but if you were to sit down and read any of those books, they're probably not going to transform your life. They may be incredible. You might base some of your character or understanding on particular issues or things from those books, but the odds are you don't have a reanimated body in your basement. If you do, I'm calling the police. But because you probably don't, that book is not transformational. It's strictly informational. It's stuff that you take in, you might think on or meditate on for just a little bit of time, but most of us are actually taking that information and applying it to a test, a quiz, an essay, Socratic seminar. Any way that we can be academic in those particular issues is very different than being transformed by what Scripture teaches. If I'm being transformed by Scripture, then it's altering my life, it's altering my understanding, my brain, my thoughts, my actions, because I want to be more like Jesus. I love him and want to be like him. And so if I read through Scripture and I'm understanding that it's meant to be transformational, then I want Scripture to transform me in a way that Romeo and Juliet, The Hatchet, Frankenstein, or Julius Caesar cannot do. And so what I want us to do is there's going to be three things I want us to focus on. The first one is go to the author, and you have unlimited access to the Lord. Hebrews teaches us that we can go to the throne of grace with all boldness. We can come before the Lord and ask, and the Lord will be faithful, and he'll be compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. That stuff from Exodus 34:6-7 is just as true about God today as it was thousands of years ago when it's being written in the Old Testament. Second, maybe you have a hard time reading through Scripture because it's just difficult to understand, or maybe it's hard, but We give a lot of attention to things that really, really matter to us. And so I want to challenge you, if you're having a hard time understanding some of these areas of Scripture, maybe take some time and go through a commentary. Now, that may seem like a daunting or difficult task for a lot of you, but spend some time, just Google. You can Google anything, right? Like I looked up the other day, all kinds of stuff on Google that really have no care in the world, like how much a narwhal tusk costs, like things like that. Google has all of that stuff in one categorical place. And so if you are curious about what Scripture teaches and maybe you're stuck on a particular verse like Daniel 2:26, you could type in Daniel 2:26 commentary, and some great ones are like Enduring Word or Bible Hub. They give you a lot of different contexts and a lot of different people who have read and studied and are different people who understand these texts from different places and periods and time, as well as different backgrounds. And so maybe take some time and just meditate on some of what they're saying and how that could apply to your own life. But don't forget to go to the Lord first. Now, third is to find an accountability partner, somebody who can keep you in step with your routine on how to follow the Lord and when to follow the Lord. Someone who wants to help you to grow and be more like Christ, and they themselves want to grow and be more like Christ. It's great to have an accountability partner, but if they're not a Christian, it's not doing you any favors. They're just someone who's trying to keep you from doing bad things, not trying to help you do good things. So I challenge you and I encourage you with those three things. And man, I'm excited about what the future holds, and I look forward to going through Daniel with you guys over the next few weeks.